Okay, picture this. It's 1665. You're standing in the dark, cold halls of a Spanish palace, and the air, it's just thick with fear. You can almost taste it. Behind this huge, heavy door, a queen is in labor. But trust me, nobody is celebrating. This isn't a joyous occasion. What's happening in that room is the terrifying end result of a 200-year-long genetic experiment gone horribly, horribly wrong. A dynasty obsessed with keeping its blood pure is about to see the monstrous price of that obsession.
So, who are these people? Well, inside that room is Queen Mariana of Austria. And the guy pacing around outside, chewing his nails, that's King Philip IV. He's her husband. He's her king, and, get this, he's also her uncle. Yeah, you heard that right. And the baby they're about to have? It's going to be living, breathing proof of just how disastrous royal inbreeding can get when you take it to the absolute limit.
So, when that baby is finally born, the room goes silent. The doctors are just horrified. The child's head is massive, way too big for his tiny, frail body. His limbs are weak, and his face, oh man, his face is dominated by that infamous Habsburg lip. His lower jaw juts out so much he can't even close his mouth properly. This isn't just a baby. This is a warning sign. It's the physical result of a dynasty literally rotting from the inside out. So you've got to be asking, how on earth did it get this bad? Well, to figure that out, we got to jump in a time machine and go way back. Back to the late 1400s, to a guy named Emperor Maximilian I. See, the Habsburgs had this unique strategy for building an empire. It wasn't about winning wars. It wasn't about conquering lands. No, their weapon was marriage. A weapon that would make them the most powerful family in the world and then completely destroy them. I mean, just look at their family motto. It basically translates to, let other people wage war, you, happy Austria, you get married. And they weren't kidding. For the Habsburgs, marriage had absolutely nothing to do with love. It was a business transaction. It was a way to gobble up land and power, and most importantly, to keep that power locked inside the family. And the best way to do that? Marry your relatives, again and again and again. And you know what? At first, this crazy strategy worked like a charm. I mean, it worked brilliantly. By the time we get to Charles V, the Habsburg Empire is so huge, the sun literally never sets on it. They owned a massive chunk of the world. But here's the thing. Even as they were at the top of their game, the cracks were already showing in their DNA. Charles V himself? Yeah, his parents were first cousins. And then he did something that made it all worse. He split his empire into a Spanish branch and an Austrian branch. And what did those two branches do for the next 100 years? You guessed it, they just kept marrying each other. Okay, if we're gonna point fingers, the guy who really sets this train wreck in motion is Philip II of Spain. He was obsessed with keeping the Habsburgs on top, and he knew the only way to do that was to keep the marriages in the family. His fourth wife, this was the one that really sealed their fate. At 43 years old, he marries his 20-year-old niece, Anna of Austria. And this wasn't just a one-off thing, oh no. This became the new family playbook, the blueprint for disaster. All right, let's pause for a quick science lesson, because it's super important. We need to talk about something called the inbreeding coefficient. Don't worry, it's simpler than it sounds. Basically, think of it like a danger meter for your genes. For pretty much everyone, that meter is at 0. But when you have kids with a close relative, that meter starts to tick up. And the higher it goes, the bigger the chance that some really nasty, hidden genetic problems are going to pop up. And with the Habsburgs, this escalation was just relentless. It's like they were actively trying to break the danger meter. So Philip II marries his niece, okay? Their son, Philip III, he marries his first cousin. And then his son, Philip IV, our cursed king's dad, he goes all in and marries his own niece. Do you see the pattern? Each generation isn't just following the plan, they're doubling down, cranking up that genetic risk higher and higher. Okay, so let's put a number on this. The inbreeding coefficient for a kid whose parents are first cousins is about 0.0625. Now, that might not sound like a lot, but in genetic terms, that's already flashing a warning light. It's a real risk. So I want you to burn that number, 0.0625, into your brain, because the number we're about to see, it's going to blow that right out of the water. And you could literally see this genetic decay on their faces. It became known as the Habsburg lip or Habsburg jaw. It was the super pronounced, jutting lower jaw. And it wasn't just some weird family quirk. It was a billboard advertising their genetic problems. With every new generation of inbreeding, it got worse and worse. Imagine trying to talk or even just eat a meal when your jaw doesn't close properly. It was a constant, painful, and very public symbol of the curse they'd brought on themselves. And that brings us right back to our poor King Charles II. You know, everyone at court thought he was cursed. They whispered he was possessed by demons. They brought in exorcists. But the truth is actually way scarier than any ghost story. He wasn't cursed. He was simply the inevitable result. He was the biological bill coming due for 2 centuries of his family's choices. Okay, remember that number I told you to keep in your head? 0.0625 for first cousins? Charles II's inbreeding coefficient was 0.254. That is insane. It's more than 4 times higher than the first cousin risk. Let me put it another way, because this is mind-blowing. His genetic makeup was more inbred than a child born to a brother and sister. His parents, the uncle and niece, were genetically closer than siblings. And the result of that number was just a life of suffering. His development, both mentally and physically, was a disaster. He couldn't speak until he was 4. He couldn't walk until he was 8. Think about that. From the second he was born, he was a prisoner in a body that just didn't work. Of course, they still married him off. His first wife was a French princess, Marie Louise, and it was just a heartbreaking situation. She was vibrant and full of life, and he was this frail, broken man. In letters she wrote back home, she said he was more dead than alive. She talked about how he was always drooling, having seizures, how he couldn't even have a real conversation. And she knew right away there was no way he could ever give her a child. His day-to-day existence was a total horror show. Seriously, chewing food? Couldn't do it. He lived on soup and liquids. He had seizures all the time. He was plagued by paranoia. He became obsessed with weird rituals. He was so convinced he was cursed that he blew a fortune on exorcists trying to fix him. By the time he was in his 20s, he looked like a shriveled old man. This guy was supposed to be the king of a global empire, but he couldn't even control his own body. And here's the thing. As the king crumbled, so did his empire. You can't separate the two. The personal tragedy of this one man had enormous, catastrophic consequences for the entire world. A nation can't be ruled by a shadow, by a ghost. And for all intents and purposes, that's what Charles was. Just think about the difference. A few generations earlier, Spain was the global superpower, feared by everyone. They had this massive empire, the best army, everything. Now, under Charles II, the country's bankrupt, the empire's falling apart, their once mighty army is getting beaten left and right. And instead of a strong king, you have a bunch of advisors all fighting for power. Spain went from a superpower to a punchline. And you better believe the rest of Europe was watching. They saw this weakness, this decay, and they started circling like vultures. Everybody knew the score. Charles was sterile. He was never going to have an heir. So the big question hanging over the entire continent wasn't if he would die childless, but when. And the second he did, they all knew it was going to trigger an all-out war for the prize, the Spanish Empire. His last few years were just a slow, agonizing slide into nothingness. His body gave up, his mind went with it. He was basically locked away, totally confused, tortured by his own paranoid thoughts. The bill for 200 years of genetic gambling had arrived, and it was time to pay. And then it happened. November 1st, 1700. Charles II died. He was only 34 years old, but he looked decades older. His broken body, a battleground for genetic disorders his entire life, just gave out. And in that moment, the Spanish Habsburg dynasty, one of the most powerful families the world has ever seen, was gone, wiped out, forever. You think the story ends there? Oh no, they did an autopsy, and what the doctors found inside his body was somehow even more horrifying than what you could see on the outside. They described his heart as being the size of a peppercorn. His lungs were corroded. His intestines were literally rotting. The report claimed his body had no blood in it at all, just water in his head. It was a total catastrophic system failure. The inside of his body was a testament to his family's choices. And just like everyone knew it would, the second his heart stopped,
Europe exploded into war, the War of the Spanish Succession. It dragged on for 13 bloody years, cost hundreds of thousands of lives, and completely redrew the map of Europe. So, this genetic disaster that started with a few bad marriage choices, it ended up becoming a catastrophe for the entire continent.
So it leaves you with a pretty big question, right? The Habsburgs had it all. They ruled the world. They had more power and wealth than you can even imagine. But in their obsession, their fanatical need to keep their bloodline pure, they literally programmed their own self-destruct sequence. It's an absolutely chilling story, and it just goes to show you, sometimes the biggest threat isn't some enemy at the gates. Sometimes it's already inside the family.